Now it's the time to introduce Dr. Deyananda Chakravarthy. He is a consultant radiologist from Velamal Medical College Hospital, Madurai. And he has taken up, due to his personal reasons, he has gone to the LCH, the lifestyle. And by seeing the results, he is into this field. So I welcome you, Dr. Deyananda Chakravarthy, to deliver the session.
Thank you, sir. Well, you might be thinking what a radiologist is doing here in the diabetic conference, quite frankly. And my topic is already told by the guest speaker that it's going to be carbohydrate is an essential nutrient. Well, this is the reason. I went on a journey of my personal, I went in, and last year I was obese, I was around 92, then went into research, tried my experiments with this diet, faltered on proteins. You can see the middle picture, that is what, when I faltered on proteins, looked a little emaciated. Then went up, corrected myself, finished all the experiments, and now with the proper protein, I'm planning to get better in a healthier way. Well, coming to the topic, nutrition, quite a vast topic, but never concentrated on us. I don't remember a class being, proper class given on nutrition during my med school, and so would be for you. So there is a lot of confusion regarding nutrition, and when it comes to diet, we always tell you please go see the dietitian. We never look upon beyond diet because we've been always focused to treat patients with drugs. And coming to that, what's a nutrient as such? A substance that gives a structural and a functional component or an energy to the body. That is called a nutrient, and that should give nourishment. So the food which is necessary for the growth, health, and good condition is called nourishment. And why we need nourishment? Because it helps us in building up various parts of the body, which helps us to function far more better. But coming to what is an essential nutrient, this is the important thing. First of all, it could not be synthesized in the body, and hence it should be obtained from the diet. And second thing, if it's taken in a proper quantity, it shouldn't harm us. If it is in deficiency, it should cause diseases. And in terms of energy, it should be a better fuel source. So coming to the rule number 1, cannot be synthesized by the body. That is the apt definition to call it as an essential nutrition. And the essential nutrients are water, energy. You can know that the term energy, I didn't use carbohydrates, because energy can be obtained from carbohydrates, fats, or proteins. And then proteins, then there are 9 essential amino acids, and then there are essential fatty acids, then vitamins and minerals. Can we survive without protein? Well, the answer is obviously no, because we all know proteins are the building blocks of our body. We need proteins, and it also acts as a cofactors for many reactions. Can we survive with fat? And the answer is again a no, because every cell is almost lined by fat, and without fat, I think even me or you won't be here, and we will not be able to even differentiate whether we are male or female, for that sense, because the hormones are all based on fat. And water, I think obviously will take the right choice here. So coming to carbohydrates, can we survive without carbohydrates? So what happens? Yes, we can, because our body can produce on its own, and that's the reason we can survive without it. And that's how it's because of gluconeogenesis, that is synthesis of glucose on its own. We have a protein and fat, and they go through a process of biochemical reactions called gluconeogenesis and produces glucose. And that, in turn, gives us the energy to fuel our body. Now coming to this has been all been thought over, essential nutrients, first comes in the page is carbohydrates, because that's the primary source of fuel. And then you see that's the complex source which gives the energy. But given the stats, I don't find the carbohydrates as the only source of fuel. So there it goes off. And for that matter, there's been a lot of hype given on dietary fiber as such. But if you think as such, if you go back to the definition as such, dietary fiber is not a structural component, it is not a physiological component, nor it does provide energy directly. Are these substances truly essential? Well, these substances are demonstrably desirable in diet, because dietary fibers indirectly provide a good nutrition for the flora, which in turn helps us to absorb a lot of nutrients. So it's an indirect process. So definitely they are desirable in the diet, but if you look in the terms of definition, I don't think even this accounts for carbohydrate to be taken as a macronutrient. Well, coming to rule number 2. If taken in a normal prescribed quantity, it shouldn't harm us. Okay? So what we are seeing, how much is the carb we actually need per day. And the dietary regulations and as well as a lot of governmental organization policy holders say that we should at least take out 55 to 60%. I hope that's what everybody does here, right? So what's that amounts to? It amounts to roughly about 250 to 300 grams of carb daily. And what we eat, depending on the diet preferences, probably in South India we take idli, probably in North little people who are from the affordable classes go with cornflakes and milk. And in the lunch we have rice, veg, and everything. And in the evening we have tea and biscuits. And the dinner we have dosa, chapati. And this is for a person who follows the diet properly, thinking that he's on a healthy diet with all nutrients obtained. And what we do now with the younger generation, we do all these excess calorie diets. And what does these high carbs do to our body? And how does our body responds to it? We take carbs, which is richer, and that will induce glucose secretions, and that will increase the level of glucose in the blood, and that will cause pancreas to stimulate insulin, and that acts on the glucose. And if you are adequately functioning like a bodybuilder or a person who's athletic, who's taking on all the utilizing all the energy needs for himself, then probably it will go to the liver to store as glycogen. But as we are sedentary and we take quite a lot of carbs, the load of glycogen is very minimal. That's the problem with carbs. See, you don't have a large source of storage, whereas in fat you have tons of fat, you can store it in your body. But as carb, you can store very minimal, roughly maximum 300 grams as a glycogen. So once it crosses that, then it converts to triglycerides, that is fat. And then we become obese. So thus excess carbs makes us fat, right? And this is a cycle I think everybody would have known. You take a lot of carbs, that spikes insulin, that creates hyperinsulinemia, and this results in the cells being insulin resistant, so that's called insulin resistance. And then the sugar goes to fat, the cycle I told you already, and people feel tired because of the regulations of all the hormones, and we tend to eat again. That's, I think Bruno will talk a lot about that. And then we go on binging again with the bad carbs. And that will cause pancreas to get tired out and result in beta cell failure. So all these cause diabetes. And coming to hypertension, the increase in insulin creates electrolyte imbalances. There is an alteration in calcium and magnesium metabolism, and that results in arterial constriction, narrows down the vessel. And then sodium and potassium alteration is there. That results to water retention. Both these add up and increase the blood volume, and that's the increase in BP. And hypertension will lead to cardiovascular diseases. And once an hypertensive is always an hypertensive unless you take care of the diet in addition to drugs if needed. And other various diseases which are due to hyperinsulinemia are morbid obesity, non-alcoholic fatty liver, polycystic ovarian, which see nowadays a lot. It's quite shocking. As a radiologist, I see every day 2 or 3 patients with polycystic ovary. Actually, that doesn't come to a criteria, but indirectly it says there's a lot of people with polycystic ovaries. And coming to rule number 3, deficiency should cause a disease. Whereas you can know that protein deficiency causes severe protein energy malnutrition, vitamin A causes night blindness, vitamin D causes rickets, and what does carbohydrate deficiency cause? Any clue? And that stimulates the mechanism, whole lot of mechanisms which I failed to understand in my first year. When looking back with all the guidance of Dr. Arigan and another group, now biochemistry is seemingly very interesting, in addition to how I correlate with the diet. So that induces glycogen from the liver to be stored, which is to be released, and that produces glucose. Then that's used up, and then you get this stimulation of the fats. You see here, fats, free fatty acids and glycerol are released, and this glycerol gives carbohydrate, that's glucose, and that's been taken up for energy purposes in the Krebs cycle. And then when everything is being stimulated, you finally get this beta oxidation and ketone bodies are formed. These ketones are actually a beautiful myth. I'll come later on the slides where I'll show you. But this is more technical, but I thought it would be appropriate for this forum to be kept. And a far more simpler one, which my friend has devised, is a simple concept. See, the storage space of carbohydrate is very less. So as you keep on increasing the carbs, the fat is cut off. Whereas you keep on decreasing, then the utilization of the storage of fat, which is quite high, can be used. Pardon me, I didn't include protein for that. Just for the grammatical sense, I just added this. And deficiency of carbohydrate leads to reversible conditions like type 2 diabetes, obesity, hypertension, polycystic ovaries. So what is this diet? I personally would call it as a lifestyle, because I wouldn't feel the diet is always obsessed with when it's going to get over. It's a lifestyle. You should really relish the lifestyle. I personally do. So when you drastically reduce the carbohydrates, what does it do? As I already showed you in the mechanisms which take, the body starts using fats, and fat produces fatty acids and glycerol. Glycerol goes to the carbohydrate pathway, goes to the Krebs cycle. And what does this fatty acid do? And fatty acid also tries to produce glucose. In that process, in liver, it produces ketones. And that production of ketones is, that phase is known as ketosis. There was a question regarding what's the difference between ketogenic diet and the low carb diet. The ketogenic diet obsessively focuses on ketosis, but that I feel as a general paradigm, everybody should be on low carb, depending on what is their primary need and necessity. Everybody shouldn't blindly follow low carb, everybody shouldn't blindly follow keto. There are subsets where you need. If you are having a severely dysfunctional metabolic syndrome running in your body, I think ketogenic diet would be an appropriate answer, but that too, you should do a proper workup. That is more essential, because what I find is the social media and on internet, you get a lot of access regarding this diet, and everybody starts on their own and doesn't do a basic workup of how they are and what is their biochemical parameters, whether they are fit enough for this diet, and that leads to certain issues. And we shouldn't blame the diet for that. It's your mistake. And coming to one more complex cycle, as I already told you, the fatty acids can be used up, and these are the cells in the body which can utilize fatty acids. Actually, myocardium loves fatty acid. It functions more effectively with fatty acids, and renal cortex and skeletal muscles. And the production of ketones in the liver is being utilized by the brain. Initially, the brain does not, brain requires around 140 grams of glucose. That is the reason primarily why everybody actually says you should need carbohydrate, because the brain functions. Actually, that's not the case. If you look into studies where there have been long-term studies done on people on starvation, that is how these concepts are all arised. Because when you tend to make the people starve, but actually we don't starve in the sense, when you tend to make people starve, a lot of biochemical mechanisms happen, because that is how we have been adapted, and all these years we were able to survive comparatively to other vertebrates. And that results in ketones. So the brain initially doesn't allow it, because the fatty acids can't reach brain because of blood-brain barrier. Ketones are soluble, and then they are able to reach the brain. So they actually take up to 60%. That's what the research says. They can take up to 60% of the energy needs of brain. So the requirement of carbohydrate, as a sense, if at all it's needed, is roughly around 40 grams, and which can be easily compensated with whatever intake we are doing and whatever process like gluconeogenesis which is happening, which actually gives the required amount of glucose. So I think that's sufficient for the brain to function. And then this is the one important thing. Everybody says these things. These require, if not, then they'll lead to a lot of stresses. But actually they get the derived, this is called Cori's cycle, where you get the lactate is being utilized for gluconeogenesis to produce glucose, and that glucose is being utilized. This 36 grams is cycling. So actually this is not lost. And why I kept muscle as 20 grams is that, frankly speaking, this production of ketones is actually absolutely amazing, because that will stop all this gluconeogenesis, everything. If you're effectively producing ketones, that will provide energy requirements for most of your needs, so that you don't have to take in a lot of protein from the other tissues. Like everybody says you feel emaciated, but the protein needs to be appropriate. That is what. In my self-experimentation, I felt that, because I faltered on protein, and that's how I looked emaciated. So very simple graphical representation. We take healthy fats. That's what. Even this low carb, high fat, I wouldn't say. I would prefer to call it as low carb, healthy fats. So those things initially stimulate the glucose from the glycogen. Then that once gets over, the adipose tissue takes over, and that produces fatty acids. Once that is been there, then it goes to beta oxidation and produces this amazing stuff. This is called ketone bodies, and they give a lot of power to the heart and also to the brain. So the body can function on glucose and ketones. I think you would have got the idea by now. And that is how people from the Paleolithic era, and that's basically the concept how our group has evolved as such, ate mostly a meal that was probably a fat-rich meal. And there are data to suggest that. You can see that ketogenesis is actually an evolutionary adaptation that is concerned with all higher organ organisms, because we have got a large brain to sustain, and that requires constant energy. See, even if you don't work anything, your brain at your idles needs 600 calories. That's quite a lot of amount to be given. So that is the amount you need, even though you're not working, not doing any work or physical activity. That's the amount it needs the brain to function, to make you to breathe, that there are certain things happening to you. And at the last, you can see the evolutionary effect of ketones is therefore to spare carbohydrate reserves, muscle protein, and then they provide an alternate energy source, which is far more beneficial. So I think now you would have got, it's a low fat, it's a fat diet. Everybody calls it a fat diet. I wouldn't prefer to, because that's been preferably a diet which has been followed. And the diet which you recommend, or which we have been recommending and we have been told to recommend, is for this 30 years has led to all these complications. And the nutritional ketosis, there's been a lot of differences between ketosis and ketoacidosis. I think Bruno sir might cover on that topic. And these are the strong evidences showing a lot of benefits for these potential therapies, and emerging evidences on the other side, which can be looked upon. And coming to in terms of fuel, what's a better fuel as such? See, the reason for anaerobic glycolysis dependent tissues is that they lack mitochondria. That's the main reason. They are dependent on the Cori cycle. But for the rest of the cells which have mitochondria, there's an option given to you. You can use glucose or you can use ketones. Whereas if you tend to use ketones, the amount of free radical produced is far, far significantly less. And that's why there is a lot of research going on this neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinsonism, and amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and even for that matter, traumatic brain injury, where people, this fatty free radical degeneration is reduced significantly with the diet. And we are seeing promising results. Probably in 5 years' time, I think we'll be seeing this as an treatment option as an adjunct to the drugs. And why carbs as not a good fuel? As I already told you, they produce a lot of free radicals, and fat provides a lot of ATP. You can see the difference. That's 129 ATP compared to 38 we get from glucose, and it almost supplies twice the energy, because fat is around 9 cal, gives 9 cal, carb gives 4 cal, and then ketones gives the sustained, that's the important thing. You don't have that fluctuations. That is the reason why people get all these emotional stresses. And once you're in diet, even depression, they say, comes in a lot, because depression is actually due to deficiency. That's why probably, I don't know, we are seeing a lot of people who are depressed nowadays. And take home messages are carbohydrates. I think you will accept with me after this diet, are not an essential nutrients. Too much carbohydrates makes us unhealthy, and carbohydrates should be considered to cut down to a very minimal quantity, depending on what's your need and what's your biotype and what you require. It's not like somebody else is following that and I should follow that. I didn't get the same result. You just never the comparison with others. It's a comparison of your own body trying to accept and adapt the metabolism. And that's the key to good health. And it's not a short-term diet, it's a long-term lifestyle. So nutrition is an art to eat intelligently. The doctor, I think, of the future will no longer treat the human brain with drugs, but rather will cure and prevent disease with nutrition. Thank you.